This is Amud Yomi, Gemara Shabbos, Daf Yud Aleph, Amud B. We're only in the very bottom of Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph. We just finished learning the Mishnah. The Mishnah taught us two parts of the Mishnah. The first part of the Mishnah taught us about Gzeiros Dirabanan, what you're not allowed to do on a Friday, because Shema, perhaps you can end up carrying such an item on Shabbos. And part B of the Mishnah continued with Gzeiros about reading by a candle. And finally, similar Gzeiros about Zav and Zava eating together due to the fact that they might come to sin. Says the Gemara, Tanan Hasam, two lines at the bottom, Amid Aleph, we learned in a Mishnah. Person's not allowed to be in Rishus HaYachid and bend over into Rishus HaRabim and drink. Similarly in the reverse. Why? Because while you're drinking, you might bring the cup to where you're standing and thereby violate carrying from one rishus to the next. Aval, however, if he enters his head, the majority of his body, to the area that he is drinking, meaning he bends over and the majority of his body is in such an area, then it is mutter. Why? Because we're not worried that he's going to, by a mistake, pull back if he's in such a position. It continues the Gemara as we turn over to Yalvamibis. V'chein begas, and similarly by a wine press, which we'll see in a moment, says Rashi what this means. Ibayilu asks the Gemara, Karmelis mai, are you allowed to stand in a Karmelis? We know that Karmelis is an intermediary rishos. Karmelis is somewhere between a Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah. That midaraisa, there's no problems. But midarabanan, you're not allowed to transfer from Rosh Hashanah to Karmelis and Karmelis to Rosh Hashanah. So ask the Gemara, what is the status of a Karmelis? Are you allowed to stand in a Karmelis and lean into Rosh Hashanah or lean into Rosh Hashanah? Amar Abaye, it's the same thing as the case we just spoke about of Rosh Hashanah into Rosh Hashanah. Rava Amar, what do you mean? He go for Gzeira. A Karmelis is a Gzeira of Anem and Ekam and Gzeira. You make another Gzeira on top of that? No way, says Rava. Amar Abaye, what should I tell you? You know my sources. You know I know this from Dikatani. It said in the Mishnah V'chein Begas. And similarly, why a wine press? That it said that seemingly you're leading into the wine press, or vice versa. And my gas, what is a gas? If you tell me the wine press is a simple yachid, tanina, then it's just repeating the same case. Don't say there's just a rabbin and lean into yachid. Don't say there's just a yachid and lean into the rabbin. And don't say there's just a rabbin and lean into a wine press, which is a yachid. It's the same case. If just a rabbin, again tanina. Elalav said Abaye must be that when it said v'chein begas, it meant it's a Carmelist. That's why Abaye says that you're not allowed to lean into the Carmelist as well, because that's what we learn from the case of gas. Says Rava. So Rava argued. And Rava said, no, it can't be. Why not? Because said Rava, it's a gezerah like gezerah, and we do not say such a thing. So Rav Amar, how does he explain when the price is said v'chein legas? Rav Amar v'chein legas leinin meiser. When it said v'chein legas, that's referring to the dinim of meiser, not a din of Shabbos. V'chein Rav Sheshes v'chein legas leinin meiser. What does that mean? The Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah. Shoisin ala gas. One is allowed to drink over the gas, the wine press, whether it is the wine is diluted with hot water, whether the wine is diluted with cold water, and it's potter, he does not have to take off meiser yet. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Meir holds that when you drink in the wine press, it's not a drinking that is kaiveya, that this item is a complete item that now you have to give off meiser. It's more of a casual derech arai type of drinking, and therefore you do not have to take off meiser. Rav Zadik mechayiv. Rav Zadik says no, that once you dilute the wine, even if you sit there, or I say stand there in the wine press and drink it, the fact that you diluted it, says Rashi, that itself is a form of finishing of the product, and therefore you have to take off meiser. V'chachamim, they say a middle level. Alachamim, if you dilute it with hot water, then chayiv, you have to take a meiser. What's the reason? Because if you dilute it with cold water, the excess one, you can always pour back, so it's not considered the completed process. So 3 shitais with regarding the gas when it is chayiv in meiser. So Rava is going to learn that when our Mishnah says v'chein begas, it's going to be explaining a similar type of heter. What's a similar type of heter? That it's a more casual type of drinking, and that's the center, the crux of this machlekes, whether there's going to be a chi of meiser or not, and that's really the connection over here. We're talking about standing around and leaning into the yachid, or vice versa. Are you allowed to do that? Similarly, by a gas, if you're standing and leaning and drinking in such a mannerism over the wine press, whether you will be chayiv to take off meiser or not. Says the Gemara Tanan. We learned in a Mishnah, this goes more yisodi, as we would say, more fundamental in the machlekes Abaye and Rava. We're about 14 lines down. The first one line is Tanan. Says the Gemara, quoting a Mishnah, said the Mishnah, the chayat of the tailor cannot go out holding his needle close to nightfall, close to Shabbos. Why? My love, a big day. Are we not discussing a case? Where's the needle? He's not holding it. It's pinned in the garment, which is the way that a chayat, a tailor, normally carries his needle. Which carrying in such a mannerism, explains Rashi, is only a din d'Rabbanan because you're not holding it. And yet, what do we see? We made a gezerah, even safeguarding the d'Rabbanan. So what do we see? That we seemingly, yes, say gezerah in such a scenario. Like Abaye said, answers Gemara, Loi, did not talking about a case where he's holding it in his hand. Tashma, we try again. Big Day says the Bryce explicitly, Chayat, a tailor cannot go out with a needle that is pinned in his garment. My love, Erev Shabbos. Are we not talking about Erev Shabbos? And we're seeing that you're not allowed to go out, even though it's only a Derabanan, because a Gezerah they made to safeguard that we don't want you to even come to Iver Derabanan. We see like Abaye, Gzer, Gzer, Amrinan. Answers Gemara, Loi, Kitanhi, B'Shabbos itself, that you're not allowed to. The Bryce is teaching that you're not allowed to go with the pin in your garment even on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Tanya, let's try again another raya. Again, we have machlekes Abaye and Rava. Abaye said we do say Gzer l'Gzer. Rava said we do not, and we're trying to prove it. Tanya, we try again. You're not allowed to go out with the pin in your garment. On Erev Shabbos, before nightfall. So explicitly, it says, where is this needle pinned in your garment? What are we talking about Erev Shabbos? So we see clearly, like Abaye, that we, yes, say Gzer l'Gzer. Answers the Gemara, Hamani. Who is this Brisa like? Rabbi Yehudi. Damar Uman Derech Nasei Chayiv. Says Rabbi Yehuda Chiddush that an Uman, a craftsman, if he carries something the way that he normally does, even though it's not in his hand, you're still obligated. You're still Chayiv. So therefore, the Chayat, the tailor, how does he transport? How does he carry a needle? Generally in his jacket, pinned into his garment. So that'll be a biblical way of carrying it. Midaraisa. Therefore, it's not Gzera, Ligezera. The Tanya learned to the price of Chayv Machtai, Hatchuvalai Bebigde. V'loi Nagar nor a carpenter Bekisa Shabaznai. The ruler behind his ear. V'loi Sairek B'Mashicha Shabaznai. With the cord behind is here, which is, this is how they would make, this is, they would fluff up the cloth and things like that. So certain utensils, they would use a certain type of comb. V'lo gardi, not a weaver, be'ira shebaznai, with the stopper behind his ear. V'lo saba, not a dyer, be'dugma shebasavari, the swatch on his shoulder. It's lo shulchani, not the money man, be'dinner shebaznai, with a dinner behind his ear. V'im yatsa. These are all ways of people transporting the way that those craftsmen do. And says the Bryce, and if you did it, as we can anticipate, you're not carrying it. So it's Asa Rabban. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. Uman derech umnasai chayiv. V'shar kol adam is going to be potter. So again, we have no proof either Tabai or Rava. Says the Gemara Tinichada. We're about 10 lines from the wide lines. First one line is potter. We learned in a Brisa, Azav cannot go out with his kiss, with his pouch. This was a type of almost like an undergarment that he would wear around his aver to catch any of the emissions that came out of him. He's not allowed to wear it on Shabbos. Another rice that says, he can't go out. So we have a stira. The Zav wearing this pouch around his aver. What is this? Is this the Daraisa Darabanan? Rav Yosef like Kasha Harameir. One is Rameir Harav Yuda, like we just said. If it's Derech Nasa, if it's the way that you do it, so Zav, this would be the way that he does it. Says Rav Yehuda, you're chayiv. So Rameir says it would only be an Isser Dira Banan. Amalei Abaya, Emu the Sham says the Rameir. When the Rameir says it's a Dindra Banan, but midid lav Hainu Orchei, something that's not normal, but midid the Haini Orchei, but where it itself is normal, meaning. Let's use the needle case, the needle in the jacket. Needle you carry. For the guy that it's his umnos, he puts in his jacket. That's where Amir says it's a Rabbanan. But however, something which even this item is made to be worn this way. This is some sort of, again, undergarment, some sort of pouch to catch the emissions from the Aver Mishamasle. Who told you that Amir holds his only in Issa Rabbanan? And says the Gemara, Rameir must hold that it's in his daraisa. So if you're not going to say this, a head that carves out a hole in a log on Shabbos, Rameir you're going to tell me it's going to be an Issa Darabanan? Of course not, because that is the normal way of doing it. So says the Gemara, what does the Brisa mean, which says that the Zav is only over an Issa Darabanan? It explains the Gemara. With this we conclude. Elam Rav Amnuna loikasha kam bezav al shtei riyos. Kam bezav bal gimel riyos. A zav bal shtei riyos is going to be chayiv because he wants to see what comes out of him to know if he's going to become a zav gedayla, if he's going to have the third riyah. Whereas a zav bal shloisha riyos, he's talking about a zav who already knows that he's a zav, so he doesn't care about what comes out of him. So therefore, it's only going to be an isser derabanan. Says my zav al shtei is the chayiv di b'alei l'bdikus. He has to check it. Zav al shalosh nami says mar b'alei l'sfira. Zedin that the zav has to count his zayin nikiyim, his 7 clean days. So he also has to know what's coming out of him. Says the Gemara, on that day of the third discharge, on that day the Zayin Nikim did not start yet, and that's the reason why it's a dinner up on it. It says, you do need it. You might not need to count, you might not need it for a badika, but you need it because you don't want your clothing to get dirty. This Tana holds when you wear something, and this is a very halachically significant teretz of the Gemara. This is very relevant to a woman wearing a pad on Shabbos in an area without an ear of whether she's allowed. As the Gemara here says, if you're only wearing it la'atzulei tinif, to save your garment from getting dirty like a chashiv, that's not legally, that's not halachically significant. The Tanan, someone turns over a plate on the wall while it's raining to stop the rainwater from going on his produce. In Bishvil, if you want the plate to be rinsed, then the plate is considered, it's makabel tumah, because you want it for its purpose. Vim Bishvil, you don't want the wall to get damaged. So what do we see? When you're doing something just to protect it from damage, is not halachically significant, and therefore, the brisa that says that the zav is not chayiv midaraisa is because he's only wearing it because he does not want his clothing to get dirty, and therefore that is not called of proper usage, and therefore he's not going to be over the iser de'araisa. Stop over here. I'll pick it up as the Gemara is going to continue asking back from this comparison with this plate covering the wall. The dinei tama v'tayra b'siyata dishmaya.